Head over to our contest page and enter for your chance to win a pair of free passes to see Den of Thieves 2 Pantera, starring Gerard Butler and O'Shea Jackson Jr., coming to theaters on January 10th. That's KFAN.com. Keyword contest to enter.
What's going on, Ben Goessling? How are you?
I am doing well. I'm sort of caught up on sleep, so that's better than yesterday was.
Ben Goessling covers the Minnesota Vikings. He's the lead beat writer for the Star Tribune, covering the Minnesota Vikings, at Ben Goessling via Twitter. And this is courtesy of Standard Heating and Air and standardheating.com. Do you happen to know, before we move on with looking back partially or minimally and looking forward in maximum fashion, any idea if Kevin O'Connell has a partial no trade in his contract? He's going to be in here less than an hour from now. And before I ask him,
are you going to ask him that?
Absolutely. Do you have a partial no trade? And if so, it'd be great if you shared the teams that you would prefer to not go to.
Yeah.
But I want to get the intel, get it all vetted out first. Does he have a no trade in his contract?
I do not believe so. I have not inquired to that level of detail specifically, but I don't think he does.
Okay.
I don't think they're thinking about it.
Okay, understandable. Now we can move on. That Sunday splash, that caused some people to think about some different things outside of the final game of the regular season. I mean, it's a 10-10 non-starter. It's like expecting Brett Rippon to start Monday night against the Rams in the postseason, right?
Yeah, there's no way they're thinking about that. This is, part of it. The conversation comes up because he is heading into a contract year. Mm-hmm. That's going to be discussed when there hasn't been a contract yet, but this is kind of...
Well, I want to stop you right there. Why, if it's final year next year, and the season they're having this year, and him being in Coach of the Year conversation, why is the conversation now even a starter?
Well, I think the only thing there, and when we asked Mark Wolf this question in August too, the first time they did a deal with Mike Zimmer, it was with 2 years left on his existing contract. Now, I should point out that the second and third times they did a deal with Mike Zimmer, and part of it is I've thought back more over this over the last couple of months as this become more of a question. They waited until the last year of the contract with Zimmer the second and third times, including the time where they released a statement to Mike Florio saying, we are not firing Mike Zimmer as they headed into that playoff game against the Saints. So they, even at that point, that took a few more months before that deal got done. So the Wilfs process tends to be to wait until the last year. And I think because of the Zimmer thing and because of that precedent, and probably some of our questions initially were based on that first time with Zimmer. And
interesting.
The resumes being very similar. But yeah, I think that's probably where some of this is coming from, is that they didn't do it at that same time frame that they did with Zimmer the first time.
Understood. But like answering where it came from would be more from a national spectrum, right?
Probably.
Like locally, unless I've missed something. I mean, I got you.
Yep.
I got Seifert.
Yep.
I got Alec.
Yep.
I don't need anything else. That's about all I need when it comes to things like that.
Sure.
And then, getting us to start to think,
Yeah, no, I think it's probably a national thing, and I think...
I got Dane. I got Dane.
Sure.
I like Dane. Dane does good work.
Sure.
So does Matthew Collar.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things this time of year, probably people start to talk a little bit, and teams know this. Teams know how long these contracts are, and teams talk enough to agents to have an idea of where these things are going, and if there's been contact, then I'm sure it's say, hey, if there's been no contact yet, then, keep us in mind. But some of this is there's been no contact because the Wilfs are, I think, thinking this is an off-season discussion. And Mark Wilf said it last week. I talked to him a couple of weeks ago. That story ran over the weekend. He said, we are looking forward to having conversations with Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah about contracts after the season. I don't think there's any question that the Wilfs will want to get something done. They obviously have to make it worth his while, because by not doing it before the year, and he's had the year that he's had, he's made himself a lot of money. I mean, he has had a phenomenal year and may end up being the coach of the year. We'll see how that voting goes. But I don't think there's any chance that they're not going to come to the table and make a strong offer. They know what they have. They love what he brings to this building. I just don't think it's going to be a big issue when everybody gets down to the table And I'm sure they'll put a very nice offer in front of him.
What was now that you saw the game, you covered the game, you wrote about the game, you've gotten yourself some rest and a little time to think about it before the coordinators chat today with Flores into Wes Phillips into Matt Daniels, Darnold. But just what do you think happened?
Well, I think footwork was a lot of it. I mean, just watching it back, it was very jittery, and this seemed that way when I watched it live, but even watching it back, I mean, you hear Kevin O'Connell talk all the time about base, balance, and body position. That's like having a strong tripod, a strong place to transfer from. And this is every sport. This is, a baseball swing, a slap shot in hockey. If your lower half and your core are strong, you're able to deliver with force and deliver on a predictable trajectory and be able to make throws on a line. He didn't seem like he had that to the degree that he has a lot of the season. You just saw kind of some hopping around, some hitching in a way that he has not done when he's been good. I mean, when the last month and a half after that Jacksonville game, he has been, I think, really dialed in that part of it especially. And I don't know what led to him not being there with it on Sunday, whether it was the rush, whether it was the Lions doing some different things in coverage, whether it was the Lions doing what they do in coverage and disrupting timing. I think nerves is another question. Yeah, I think all of those things are part of the soup here, and figuring out which ingredient needs to come out of the soup or the recipe needs to get refined by Monday night is a big factor. I think they'll probably start with footwork, but are nerves part of this? You have to figure that out because he's going to his first playoff game, and you have to know if that's something that they have to kind of have a plan for and walk him through this week.
Let me ask you this about what you know or what you can share. If you do know about the amount or lack thereof of what you can put in front of Sam. Here's what I'm getting at. When you got a game plan, you're coming up to the game, there's some who need it laid out like this. Stop. That's it.
Sure.
That's all we have.
Yep.
And it's going to be fine. And it has been fine. Or, like Cousins, you can put a voluminous nature in front of him, and eventually, once it becomes rote, second nature, and he's comfortable with it, he can decipher, he can weave his way through what's needed. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Which one is Sam?
Well, I don't think he's Cousins in that regard. I'm not sure how many are. And some of that is Cousins is so studious and so just like, give me more, right, that some of that is just his process more so than even maybe what coaches expect. And I think, you could argue with Cousins sometimes that maybe it ends up being too much. Maybe it's information overload and he doesn't play freely as a result of that. I think Darnold, his first year in the offense, there has probably been a little more of, hey, let's walk through this step by step, and we don't need to give you the graduate level discussions as you'll often hear it talked about with relation to Cousins.
Right.
I think he has grown in that regard. What you hear about him, I mean, we've heard Kevin O'Connell say this, and I think he said it with you guys a couple weeks ago. Darnold wants to be coached. He wants to be told pretty candidly what he needs to fix, and I think that Jacksonville game after that, Kevin O'Connell has said he came in and did a lot of that himself. So some of it with him, I think, is they've moved it along. I think they're getting more to the point where he'll say, hey, I don't like this concept in the game plan. The red pen meetings that O'Connell talks about. I think those things have grown throughout the season. But yeah, there's no doubt they're not at the same types of discussions with him as they would have had with Cousins when this offense was basically built for Cousins. I mean, that's the other piece of it. This offense, the ground floor of this was Kirk Cousins and Kevin O'Connell saying, hey, we want to do this and this. Sam Darnold came into this that was built for, it was a car that somebody else helped build, and now he's driving it. So you have to change the preferences and the settings for the new driver to some degree, too.
And at this stage of the season, if you're Kevin O'Connell and even if you're Sam, you got to trust that the same type of adjustment that was made after a Jacksonville game can be made in this short period of time as well. Because in the end, you can't help the fact that it's his first preseason or postseason game. You can't help the fact that, this moment happened in a spot that it did.
Yeah.
That now it's just, it has to be business as usual. And you mentioned maybe they go back to some body work or some footwork.
Yeah.
And you're right. I don't want to say he's obsessed with it, but the fundamentals of the footwork is a big talker that KO's been putting out there specifically about Sam and this offense since minute one. So it's kind of just well, we just got to do this now. And just kind of you have to have a level of faith and expect that the turn you made earlier is gonna happen again.
Yeah, that's it. I think there's no way to reinvent any of this at this point. There's no way to probably come out and do something completely new. A lot of it does need to be, hey, we've been here before. You got out of it. It's going to be fine. That crowd on Monday night is not going to be the same as what we heard at Ford Field.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a little more bipartisan. Let's put it that way. I don't think that it's quite the same challenge in terms of that secondary. And even with the people the Rams are missing, they did a really good job, especially with some of the ways that they kind of delay things by grabbing and holding. I don't think that's going to be quite the same with the Rams. That pass rush is good. That front is good. And we saw it in October. They can kind of slow some things down that way. But a lot of it comes down to do what you've been doing, and let's get back to it and go from there.
Is there any aspect where, as we've covered at 9 to noon, and maybe I'm just speaking about myself, did we underplay how bright the lights get in this spot for a guy like Sam, where, there's a ton of people already, it's half the foot is in 2025.
Yeah.
Do you bring him back? What do you do with this? Forgetting all of that for a second, just a guy who did throw, he has to this week remember that he threw 35 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He has to remember that he has excelled at a super high level for the duration of 2024. So we hope and expect and we need him to do that. But is there any underplaying of it, of the fact that this is his first playoff game, that other than rookie Jaden Daniels, he's the least experienced guy in the postseason right now, despite not being a rookie. But that he, again, the human element of him having what's in front of him, something that he has languished from, while searching for earlier in his career. Now it's here.
Yeah.
And the human element of him reacting to that.
Yeah, I've wondered that. I've wondered that since Sunday night. And I think talking to these coaches, they understand that the playoffs specifically, and that, for all intents and purposes, was a playoff game. It's not win or go home.
Right.
But it was, if you win, you advance a round further in the
with
playoffs.
what was at stake.
Yeah, the scene, the environment in that building, the upside of it was very much like a playoff game. So the coaches have talked about this. Brian Flores has said that I have a curriculum for my defenders when we get to the playoffs. And a lot of that is managing the emotions, managing all of everything is heightened, everything is more tense, everything moves a little faster. And how do you slow this down and say this is still the same game? He has spent a lot of time thinking about that. And this is a guy that I think coached in 23 playoff games in the Patriots, in his time with the Patriots, which does not count the time where there's like another 11 when he was a scout and in the front office. So he's been around the playoffs a lot. Let's put it that way. Kevin O'Connell has won a Super Bowl. Wes Phillips has won a Super Bowl. They have assistants on that Ram staff that were with McVay that have been through this. So there's a lot of playoff experience on this staff. And you hear a lot of them talk about there is an emotional response that you have to have because it does feel different. Everything's more intense. Everything is more, the stakes are higher. The costs are higher.
The games are officiated differently.
They are. They'll probably swallow their whistles a little bit. It's the third period of a championship hockey game where they don't call penalties the same way. They let them play.
Now you mentioned the fan standpoint, and the atmosphere is not going to be the same. And I agree with you. I'm going to bring this up with Kevin later.
Other than that public address announcer that's throwing you guys off.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Los Angeles Rams cheer. You'll hear. Well, you won't. You'll be there, but people will hear what I'm talking about on a Monday night.
You're more Alan Roach-like than I.
But you're in the press. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's open. I hear it.
Yeah,
it's not aimed at me quite the same way. But
you know what I'm talking about. That sucker is loud, man. It is loud, and it's right in front of us. Holy cow!
Yeah.
But the atmosphere will not be the same. I just wonder. There's a very large Vikings fan base chapter in San Diego.
Yes.
Might be the biggest in the country.
Yep.
That's going to be a lot of people.
Yep.
All right. Then you got the O'Connell family. That'll be a lot of people. But when it comes to like what we saw at Ford Field, with the people who got
sorry about that.
It's all good. Plane tickets and the whole thing to get there. What do you think off the dejection from Sunday night? It's not a backing into the playoffs, but I drew an analogy with the Skull story in the opening segment of this. Reminds me a little bit of 20 years ago after 2004 when they backed into the playoffs. And people just were like, yeah, it's been a decent season, and we have Moss, and Culpepper almost won MVP.
Yeah.
But this whole ending, this just sucked. I mean, they're probably not going to win, so I'm not going to pay money and go.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think a lot of people will fly in from here for a Monday night football game?
I've wondered that when I wondered that when I booked a flight, because the flights were not cheap.
$1,000.
It was I think it was $996
and
for my
you know
flight.
what? I mean, you have a right.
Star Tribune.
And when I say shame on airline carriers for being opportunistic and price gouging, you know what? I mean, I guess business works that way.
Yep.
I have the right. People have the right to say, no, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
But it's so blatantly obvious when you see flights from A to B at 610, 580, and then a week later, because people are clicking on it a lot, it's up at 1096. Yep. I mean, that's so opportunistic, but
dynamic pricing, I think, is the cutesy word for it. Anybody who's ever tried to book any travel to Green Bay, Wisconsin for an NFL game knows that this is a thing people do. Hotels, flights, all get jacked up when everybody knows that somebody's coming to one place for one reason.
High demand, right? The people want to be there.
But I just can't see this.
Going to the Boston Marathon last year, you spent some money on that too. It's the same thing.
But I can't see this being a loud... It'll be Rams friendly.
Sure.
It'll be Rams favored.
Whose house? Rams house. As they say every
Ladies and gentlemen, Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles has a deal on red beans and rice tonight until midnight if the Rams win. All right, 3-2. But it's not the greatest home field advantage ever.
It's not.
You know what I mean? What do you think is going to be like Monday night?
I think there'll be a good contingent of Vikings fans. I do wonder about the price of it. I mean, it's hard to book playoff travel. It's hard to do any of that when you're on short notice. It's just how it goes. But
Life of a scribe, though.
Oh, yeah. Yes. The cost to work-life balance about not having that bye is a real thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ben Goessling will be outside of Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center at about 2:00 today with a cup or some type of tin can, taking donations. It's beat writer relief. For what's transpired.
Well, just get a subscription and we'll call it good.
Well, let's be current about this.
Great.
Just tell everyone what your Venmo is real quickly.
Yeah, and how much you make a year. Okay, 3-2. So I've been thinking about it too. I don't know what it's going to be like Monday night.
It won't be Ford Field. We could say that.
It won't be Ford Field for sure. But you know what? Before we pause here and we talk about more things with the players in the game and stuff like that, Bursic said something yesterday when we were here, and I'm just going to frame it up the way he did and see what you say. Sunday night, Aaron Jones did not look right.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. Well, what do you think leads to that?
Well, he's been injured. I mean, he's been playing through stuff all year. And overall, I mean, I think he's at a career high for carries in a season. I think it's the first time in like 5 years that he's played all 17 games. So there is a fair amount of wear and tear, as there's going to be with anybody. But, whether it's been the ribs or the hamstring or I think the knee thing, that he had a wrap on a couple of weeks ago. He was out of the locker room late on Sunday night, coming out of halftime, and we're kind of scanning the sideline. Hey, I don't see Aaron Jones. Cam Akers is that for the first series. And I think somebody pointed out to me on Twitter, it might have been David Chow, the online pro football doc guy that we'll have a lot of injury updates pretty quickly.
Yeah, good luck with that guy.
Yeah, he said something about Jones had an IV thing in his arm.
That guy's social media reliance from but from so many important media people around the country is so conflated. It just bugs me. But anyway,
he gets a lot of attention from it. But
whatever.
He pointed out there was an IV thing in his arm
right now and say it looks fine and call myself David Chow.
Yeah, there's some of that. But at any rate, I think there has been it's just wear and tear for him. And I don't think he looks 100%, but I don't know that anybody's going to be 100% at this time of year. So, but they need him to be efficient because, they had opportunities to run in that game. Some of it is they did. He had some runs. Cam Akers obviously has a 58-yarder, and they didn't do a ton of it, but they're going to need to be able to do it, especially, I think, in the red zone.
Yeah.
Where, 6 out of 7 of their first plays down there are throws, and if timing is off, if the Lions are grabbing, if all of those things make it harder to connect in the red zone in the way that they have, lining up and saying, we need a yard, we can bang it in for a yard, it's a simple tool, but a hammer is an effective tool.
You know O'Connell every bit as well as I do. And losing it's an atopic of bugging him when the team loses because he runs the team.
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong here, because you said red zone. Right behind that, when they don't score in the red zone, I think that eats at his last nerve, unlike anything else.
Yep.
Because that's kind of a snobbish part of the field with what you run and what you change and how you get guys open. And that's what the elite NFL minds are looking at with other teams.
It gets boutique-y.
What are you doing inside the 10?
It's artisanal.
And you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I just think
it's where the chefs separate themselves.
What was it, 0 for 3 or 0 for 4?
0 for 4 in the red zone, 0 for 3, goal to go.
Red zone, into the game off the previous 3, 14 trips, 11 touchdowns.
Yeah, they've been really good.
Don't you think that's eating at his last nerve right now?
It is,
I mean, they kicked from the 7, and they turned it over on downs at the 2 and the 3. I mean, that's just apocalyptically bad.
That's going to eat at the coach.
You hit me with the running in the red zone, so now that's on my mind. But back to, I'm just going to hit you with a dumb question in relation to the health of Aaron Jones. And Cam Akers goes for 58.
Yeah.
I think that not having Jones and/or the decision to immediately then run Cam after that long run, I think that was a mistake personally. But in the end, he's not asking me for my opinions on those things. It's all good. But with Aaron Jones and the health for a team that already leans to the pass and they're more balanced than they were in the past, do you think any of that plays into ultimately the game flow? And does that dictate potentially maybe a decision that O'Connell's making in the heat of a game is, I do have to be concerned about the touches of my guy. I do have to be concerned. Maybe it is in the red area with what Aaron Jones can do, because then that could potentially create problems in its own right with the head coach trying to score touchdowns from anywhere on the field while trying to simultaneously mentally balance the health of what he's got in the backfield.
Yeah, it could. I would also say I hope it probably, for his sake, doesn't.
I hope not.
You do have to just get to a point where you say, yeah, it's hard, but we got to push through this. And, if he's not healthy enough to be out there, you put somebody else in. And some of it's blocking things up front, too. But, yeah, I think at some point, if that becomes a determining factor in the decisions he's making, that's not a good place to be.
Well, it's a terrible place to be, but it just also brings me, and maybe next segment, I do digging into the play calling in the red zone, what was available, running and moving, like getting a yard and punching it in, like that's all part of that conversation with O'Connell's offense.
Ben Goessling, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air, is on 9 to noon each and every Tuesday. Second half of the show is next.
Wild Wednesday is sponsored by Jim Beam, the official bourbon of the Minnesota Wild, are here all season long. Listen every Wednesday through March for your chance to win tickets.
You were saying?
Well, getting back to kind of the running conversation. So I started with the dumb question last segment and kind of the idea that, managing the health of Aaron Jones. This is a guy, by the way, that helped carry the Packers the way he did with the 5 straight games, triple digits on the ground, a couple of touchdowns down in Dallas, had him close in the Niners game. But now moving forward, this was, and we talked about it a bit yesterday, but the balance of when things are good, they're good. Sam Darnold with nearly a 70% completion percentage in the red area, and I believe it was 23 or 26 touchdowns and just 3 picks during, into Sunday night's game. Now, it was awful, of course. 0 for 4 in the red area, 0 for 3, goal to go. We get that. But with the way that I'm looking at it, Kevin O'Connell, the inability to just push man backwards 3 yards and punch in a touchdown, that is a massive handicap. He had guys open on each of those red zone drives.
He did.
And Sam missed them. So, the creativity of the coach, the way that he dials that thing in, combined with, as you guys were talking about last segment, the attention and the importance and how highly he carries that aspect of the offense, the coach was on point. And it's not so much worrisome about what we're going to do in the red area schematically. It's what we're going to do on the field executing that offense.
Yeah, and he may look at it and say, we had things open. I mean, they had things open all over the field. If you watch it back, they did Jordan
indeed.
Addison in a corner route at one point. They had a lot of those things open. The Hawkinson one that Darnold missed. So he may look at it and say, if we do what we did, he hits those throws 9 times out of 10 or 7 out of 10 or whatever we want to put on it. He may say it's fine. But if there's nerves, if the quarterback just needs a moment to breathe and you say, hey, hand it off. We're going to take care of this thing. They'll reestablish the line of scrimmage 2 yards down the field. and will get in the end zone that way. That is a valuable resource for a quarterback, and the fact that they haven't had as much of that, I do think matters if your quarterback is feeling it a little bit. I don't know if he was or not, but if he was, I think it's a useful tool for him to be able to have, and they haven't had a lot of that at his disposal this year. At least haven't tried a lot of it.
I just felt the way that it looked to me, he takes just things again. I think he was just too juiced. I mean, just in some way, Darnold into this moment, bright lights, and specifically, I look at little moments, not even red zone bits. He takes that 17-yard sack.
Yeah.
Now he does that backside rollout bit. I get it. He's taking but for the most part, that's not something we've seen Darnold do. He does that. Now 2 plays later, I think it was Aaron Jones for 8 or 9. He's got Hawkinson wide open up the seam. He's going to get him to the 35, and maybe it's a catch and run. We're mid-40s.
The 3rd and 18.
The 2nd and 27 becomes 1st and 10 somewhere near midfield, and he just lofts it over his head. I look at those things, and it's easy to write things off, and this is something, again, he has to remind himself. He threw 35 TDs this year, and as good as he was, he's got to remind himself of that. I do kind of look... He was too juiced.
Yeah.
The game plan looked right for the most part. And, running, what can the coach do to make some adjustments here and there? I think it was an absolute winning game plan for a shootout at Ford Field for the division and the 1 seed. I just need number 14 to not be so juiced.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to look a hell of a lot better at SoFi on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think if you're Kevin O'Connell, not that he is asking for my advice or particularly needs it, but
he's listening right now.
Well, maybe he is, but I'll put it this way. If I were to say to my runners who are nervous going into the state meet, which they get nervous, I would say, hey, you have been in big situations before. You have been in a section meet. You've been in a conference meet. You're facing the same people that you did then. So this is not any different. And I mean, it's a little bit of the old Gene Hackman measure the court thing, but he won a game in Seattle where they had not won since 2006 on a drive where the headset went out, and he got hit in the ankle where he's limping off after that play. And then 2 plays later, or 1 play later, I think it was, steps up and hits Justin Jefferson with the throw to win the game. So I think reminding him that you have been in this spot before. You beat the Packers with these same stakes. They don't get to the point where home field advantage is an option if they don't beat the Packers at home. They needed
that win
in national TV. So I think there are things to point to with him in the recent past of, you don't need to make this bigger than it is, and don't need to be jittery, because you've shown you can handle big stages before. I don't know if that will be part of the approach. If it was me coaching kids through it, as I do with high schoolers, that's part of what I'd be saying to them. So whatever that's worth.
It's 9 to noon, featuring Star Tribune beat writer Ben Goessling, courtesy of Standard Heating and Air, standardheating.com.
Defensive concerns into the Rams game, still kind of looking back and kind of trying to combine that going forward. I thought, and I've used this moment with PA, that the non-pick 6 from Van Ginkel was really kind of the moment where they get in 3 plays later with Gibbs, and I think the whole thing kind of just ended at that point. It was kind of, it's not our night, right? Overall, 17-9 into the fourth quarter, with everything on the line, I thought the defense was fantastic.
Yeah, they were phenomenal.
And I'm thinking about on that Thursday night short week, and there was some, not drama per se, but it was cloudy in terms of, are you going to get Cooper, are you going to get Puka, and all of that. Yeah. We got both, and we struggled with it. It was that they score, we score, they score, we score to start that game. Is it, the immobility of Matt Stafford was such a huge talker into that initial lineup, and I thought that initial matchup, and I thought McVay won the day with the quick game, and kept us from being able to get to him.
Yes,
I'm curious what that looks like with our defense, who I thought stood tall until they just had nothing left on Sunday night. Now into Monday night in a playoff game, that's one of the most fascinating aspects for me.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, there was a lot in that game where Stafford got the ball out quick. They knew the pressure would come, and they beat it with the quick throws. Stafford has had mobility. He had the one where he, I think, made Harrison Phillips miss and extends it and throws a touchdown as he's rolling away.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, maybe a fountain of youth moment for him a little bit. I don't know that they're going to count on him having that every time out.
He couldn't walk 4 hours after the game, but he made it happen because he's a gamer.
Yeah, I schooled the kids in the pickup court. I'm going to be paying for it for 4 days, but, they don't know that.
Got the mini buy.
Yep. So there's probably a little bit of that there, but, I mean, they have not, that offense lately has not been very productive They, I think, hung 44 on the Bills, but since then, I don't think they've scored more than 20 points. So getting him going again is going to be a lot of it for them, and I think trying to find the type of game plan that allowed them to do what they did in that first one. I'd expect we'll see some of the same things. They'll have to try to handle the pressure that the Vikings will bring, but yeah, a lot of it is going to be getting him off his spot and making him not be able to play so quickly and so efficiently. I think if they can do that, they'll have a good chance to win. But Stafford in the playoffs has been there a lot. The receivers have been there a lot with him. They have a lot of chemistry with him. So if the catch and run things are as effective for them as the first time, I think that's a tough matchup in that regard.
Would you, in closing, be surprised if Green Bay beat Philadelphia?
I would.
Okay.
I think the Packers just, speaking of limping into the playoffs or backing in, they just don't look right now.
Right.
They played the Eagles in that first game in Brazil in the slippery field. How much did that have to do with it? Mm-hmm. I don't know. But the way they are looking right now, and Jordan Love injuries, the way Jordan Love is playing, I would be surprised if they went in there and won that game.
What about Washington and Tampa? What I'm trying to get at here are two things transpiring.
Is there a home playoff
before
game?
There's a boom at 5 Pacific, 7 Central Monday night, so the scribe doesn't have to deal with price gouging from airlines the next week if indeed the Vikings do win.
So then we're Vikings Commanders at U.S. Bank Stadium.
I'll take it.
And then Packers Lions, and then maybe an all NFC North championship game. Well, then it's Packers Vikings for the NFC Championship at U.S. Bank Stadium. I think Vikings fans, even if they're nervous about that, they probably feel okay playing that team right now. I don't think that happens. I think the Commanders,
of course you do,
have a better chance with Jaden Daniels. I just don't think the Packers going into Philly is terribly likely. But if it were to happen, sleeping in my own bed would be a nice bonus of it.
Thanks for coming by. Good seeing you.
Good to see you, too.
Ben Goessling covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune at Ben Goessling via Twitter. News du Nord is next. Then Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, about 20 minutes from now.
Coming out with the Power Trips, Max Fuller. Never heard of him, but he sounds exceptionally handsome. Tonight at Rack's Bar in Burnsville for a Wolves watch party. Get there at 7 p.m. to watch your Minnesota Timberwolves in action and to sign up for your chance to win first round playoff tickets this year. Get the full details now at KFAN.com, keyword calendar. Rack's in Burnsville. Come party, y'all.
Welcome back, 9 to noon. Stay tuned. Next segment, head coach Kevin O'Connell will be here at TCO Studios with PA. It's time for News du Nord, which is brought to you by The Casino at Canterbury Park, CanterburyPark.com. And I must remind you, you got to get yourself ready for the $100,000 bonus weekend. It's at the casino at Canterbury Park, January 17th through the 21st. I've talked about poker and blackjack and table games. Well, they have this sweet Ultimate Texas Hold'em table game. They're adding an extra $100K to the jackpot. So check that out. Don't miss out on all the fun at Canterbury Park, by the way. Go to CanterburyPark.com for the details. A couple of NFL coaching changes, maybe not surprising.
Yes.
They happened yesterday. We were still sifting our way through the ashes of Vikings and Lions at Ford Field. But Doug Peterson, no surprise there, let go and relieved of his duties with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Right.
One thing, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, I guess. I'm not up there listening to Zolak and company on WBZ 98.5, the Sports Hub. But Gerard Mayo, they made a lot of Gerard Mayo getting an opportunity after Bill Belichick, and it's a one and done. And so now the Patriots are out in the mist right now, looking for a new head coach. Curious how that'll go. But while the Vikings, it felt like an awful end of season Monday yesterday. Vikings are in the playoffs, but this is the time of year where you start hearing Ben Johnson, who's agreed now already to interviews with the Bears and Patriots. Jacksonville will be an option, although Is it an option? But those things are happening for a lot of teams in the NFL right now.
No doubt. And there are going to be a lot of metaphorical shoes to fall where those who get that their copyright Led Zeppelin, you have good times, bad times. The bad times are going to be those who get left out of the shuffle. In other words, people are hired. They thought, well, you know what? That's my dog. So, of course, I'm going to be on the staff. Of course, I'm going to be involved in the new covenant. And then they're not. Well, the sad part of it is they're at the East-West game, then in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, basically with name tags like have mind, will travel, looking for jobs. Gets a little sad from what I hear. But secondly, this is the time of the year, and I won't get into it with O'Connell today, but it's owners of teams and general managers and those who know they're staying. But they also know they have those on staff who are interviewing for other jobs. That's when you see assistant coaches' doors closed at facilities. And you got a game coming up and wondering, why is Nordo's door closed?
Yeah.
What are we doing in there? Who are we talking to? What are we getting ready? Where you just have to be cognizant of the professionalism of the people. So just think, I hired you because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way down to L, and R, because you're responsible, and organized and reliable. Okay, well, are you responsible, organized, and reliable when somebody's seeking your services, yet I'm relying on you to try to get ready for a game?
Yeah.
That's just kind of en vogue around the NFL right now.
Well, I don't believe that there will ever be a rule change, and whatever collective bargaining process is probably part of that on behalf of the coaches. Mm-hmm. It is preposterous. The last time that the Vikings had to deal with it was 2019 playoffs, right? And it was Kevin Stefanski, and you're fresh off the OT winner to Big Boy, and Adam Thielen and feeling good. Now we got to go out to Santa Clara, and we kind of get bludgeoned in the Bay, and Marcus Sherrills muffing a punt, and after getting that first touchdown early, I think it was Aldrick Robinson maybe, or maybe it was Diggs, I forget exactly. But the idea is Stefanski clearly was not focused on the Niners game because he was all but, via media reports, on his way to Cleveland and the shores of Lake Erie. So I wish it would change where we don't have to talk about this the way that we do. Clearly, guys on winning teams that still have games to play for, those are the ones that are being sought out for these opportunities.
Right.
I just wish we could put that pause. Somebody lifts a Lombardi, and then it can be a mad dash mid-February for those coaching jobs.
There are a couple on this staff. Brian Flores reportedly is being sought after by the Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
I believe if that's true, then he would interview with the Bears. I have no idea when. Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach, supposedly.
I saw his name pop yesterday, actually, somewhere.
With the New York Jets, where he's going to get a head coaching interview opportunity with the New York Jets. I mean, McCown was with the Jets recently, certainly as a player, so he knows the right people within the covenant to give him an opportunity. Plus, he's really good at what he does. So that those are things that pop up this time of the year, and it's as the players and/or personnel or coaches, people, you've heard it a million times. It's the business part of the equation, and something with which we have to deal.
Minnesota Timberwolves win 108-106. It was Anthony Edwards with the game winner and 16 of the Wolves' final 17 points that pushed the Howl past the Clippers, and not much time to rest. By the way, Anthony Edwards, I think it's 90 points in his last two games. Yeah, the 53 at Cade Cunningham and the Pistons, and then 37 last night. They are in New Orleans this evening to take on the Pelicans. That's at 7 o'clock. And a little bit of channel flipping paradise for local sports fans. The Minnesota Wild are going to be hosting the St. Louis Blues at the X tonight at 7 p.m. as well. So a little double feature, but it was good to see the Wolves push past Harden's Clippers last night.
I think Edwards either outscored the rest of the starters of the Minnesota Timberwolves by himself last night, or he got close. And I think that's noteworthy because there was a change in the starting lineup. Dante DiVincenzo went into the starting lineup and replaced Mike Conley. But Conley had some important minutes at the end of the game. So their times, copyright Bob Dylan times, they are a changing right now for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and hopefully they lead to more victories. Speaking of the Wild, John Hines, coach of the Minnesota Wild, will be on 9 to noon tomorrow, right out of the gate at 9 o'clock.
Yeah, and statistically, as we look at things, he came just short, PA. He scored 37. Mm-hmm. The rest of the Wolves starters, 39
Oh,
points.
wow, okay.
39 points. So at least a little bit of support there. This news just in following, I know Mike Vrabel, former Titans head coach, expected to be among those getting interviews.
Time for one more.
Rand Carthon, the Titans GM, has just been let go.
Oh.
Callahan remaining the head coach.
Yeah.
And again, that kind of activity taking place. We talked earlier with Lavelle in detail about Ben Johnson and how highly touted and how highly sought after he is. But some GM spots are opening up as well. I heard some scuttlebutt that the GM, I think it's Terry Fontenot in Atlanta, that there might be changes potentially down there as well. So all that stuff's happening rapid fire style as most teams enter their offseason. Teams like the Vikings headed to the postseason.
And things are quite secure here with the Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. Likewise for general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And one of the two aforementioned names joins us around the corner for X's and O's. It's weekly from Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center at around 11 o'clock. Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, joins the 9 to noon radio show, and that is next on KFAN.